Hello everyone, and today it is my great pleasure to introduce two of Australia's leading critical theorists, Ariel Salleh and Mary Graham. They're going to be talking to you today about holding, thoughts on body and country in place. Now, I'd like to read out the bios for each, starting with Mary Graham. Mary Graham is Associate Adjunct Professor in Political Science and International Studies at the University of Queensland and Doctor of the University at QUT. She grew up in Southeast Queensland and is a Kumbu person through her father's heritage and a Waka Waka clan through her mother's heritage. With a career spanning more than 30 years, Mary has worked across several government agencies, community organisations and universities, including the Department of Community Services, Aboriginal and Islander Childcare Agency, the University of Queensland, and the Foundation for Aboriginal and Islander Research Action. In 1992, Mary also served as the Commissioner for Queensland Corrective Services. Mary has been a dedicated lecturer with the University of Queensland, teaching Aboriginal history, politics, and comparative philosophy. She has also lectured internationally on these subjects and developed and implemented the core university subjects of Aboriginal perspectives, Aboriginal approaches to knowledge, and at the postgraduate level, Aboriginal politics. Mary has written and published many prominent works, including publications in the Aboriginal Encyclopedia, training models for cross-cultural awareness, and a host of academic papers. Now, Ariel Salleh is visiting professor in humanities at Nelson Mandela University, South Africa, a former senior fellow in post-growth societies, Friedrich Schiller University, Jena, Germany, and associate in political economy, University of Sydney. Her transdisciplinary writing is seminal to political ecology as an emerging study of humanity-nature relations. Her work emphasizes the place of reproductive or regenerative labor in the world system. By restoring value to everyday caregiving skills and Indigenous knowledges, Ariel re-examines social justice and sustainability issues such as climate change and neoliberal green economy. This work draws on activist experience in anti-nuclear politics, water catchments, biodiversity protection, and support for Asia-Pacific women's eco-sufficient communities. Her sex-gendered critiques of eco-socialism, deep and social ecology, liberalism, and postmodern feminism provokes international debate, and she is responding with a multi-volume critique of these discourses. Her embodied materialist theory of meta-industrial labor is developed in ecofeminism as politics, eco-sufficiency and global justice, and some 250 chapters and articles. She serves on several editorial boards and was a senior editor of the US journal Capitalism, Nature, Socialism. She recently co-edited Pluriverse, a post-development dictionary containing over 100 essays on transformative initiatives for an alternative global future.
Yes. Mary, it's such a joy to be talking with you and to be discovering your work, really. And to be discovering the commonalities between us. Yes, it's a joy. I thought it might be a good idea if we took off from the title that we cooked up some time back now, and wove our thoughts around the key words in that title. So if you feel okay that way, I'd quite like to kick off with the concept of place. Maybe discuss place, then move to country, then to body, then to holding.
Yes. Yeah.
And place, it has such a central place in your thinking and work. And as you say, it's an ontological place. Being in place offers an ontological compass. It helps us create identity.
Yes.
And place, of course, relates to the Indigenous notion of the land as law.
Yes.
And one other idea of yours that seems to come up in this context is that time and space are actually embodied in us. Yeah. So I was reading your article, Spirit, Place and Spirit, from the magazine Earth Song a couple of years back. But there must be more things you would want to add to that little ramble.
Yes.
Of place.
Yes, to do with place itself.
Yes.
There is the idea for Aboriginal people that that place gives birth, actually literally to us. It actually gives birth to us. We come out of place. There are umpteen number of dreaming stories exactly across the country. And remember, this is the big continent. It's as many countries, as we call it, sacralized notion of what our land is, country, that every different story, dreaming stories, and there are several per place, there are hundreds and hundreds of places, and all of it is about how the land creates us. And in the words of Aboriginal people, the land grew us up, they'll say. They mean it in the literal human development way, that we came, and our ancestors, that is flora and fauna, come before that.
Very empirically correct.
Yes, well, it's I often say the science is right, actually, and it's as if Aboriginal people, what they did was sacralize the science. Yes. They made that sacred, you know. So it's quite right, you know, how we come out of land, you know, literally, and we're grown up, we develop and develop and develop. It's just that we give the responsibility of that, or the reasoning for that, for those flora and fauna and all other life forms are our ancestors. That's what it actually means. So place is that is what place is.
I was thinking there's never a time in history more that we needed this phrase, an ontological compass.
Yeah, absolutely.
Contemporary society,
yes,
the way things are going.
Yes.
So to move over to country, and why we need an ontological compass,
yes,
is modernity is labouring under the false universals of the Western Eurocentric
yes,
and post-Enlightenment era.
Yes.
And the false universals, I'm thinking on, the split, the division between humanity here and nature there, or the split between men and women, as if there were a hard dividing line there, or between white versus black, or subject versus object.
Yes.
The whole notion of flow and process and relationality and interconnection is lost in modernity. Yes.
It seems to me like that, because when we started off, when the starting point is that land has invented us, so we are obviously nature too. We're part of nature, not just part of it. We are actually nature too. So that means that we immediately enter into relationalism straight off, without trying to figure it out, you know, and so on. But the stories around about it, which are the figuring out, really, the stories abound, because every part of the country, this is all countries around the world, the part of the landscape of every country is all different. You know, it's probably, except maybe for, say, the North Pole, where everything is white and snow and ice and so on and so on. But in most countries, the majority of countries, wherever you go in the country, it's different landscape, and that means different stories. Actually, that means different versions of relationalism. But relationalism is bound up with survivalism too. Because, of course, in some countries, big, scary, bitey things are there, and you have to save yourself, and sometimes save yourself from other people, and so on and so on. So all versions of survivalism is present there too, but they are entangled. So relationalism, and it's not either or, it's not an excluded middle. It's they're entangled with each other. And how Aboriginal people work out these difficulties of just simply existing and living with everything else and everybody else, is to use relationalism as a counter to survivalism. You can't get rid of survivalism. The notion of it, it's there all the time, but it counters it. It helps to manage survivalist tendencies. That's really what it does.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not to do with becoming good or wise or anything like that. It is to do with, in fact, it's not a moral philosophy. It's logic. You know, it is logic. It's rational. It's sustainable, as people often say about Indigenous people, sustainable. But it's rational, and it's common sense, actually, of the way of organising. So a famous, it's not famous, but it's a term that a friend of mine often uses is what it is for us. It's a long-term experiment in human order making. That's actually what it is.
Yes,
You know,
yes.
very long-term.
Mary, this country making us, and we make country, this custodial ethic, as you call it, a custodial ethic. It almost resonates with the notion of parenthood.
Yes, it is. Yeah,
custodial
that's right.
ethic. And of course, it's a material ethic. In both cases, it's expressed materially. I think somewhere or other you say that morality is physical. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, they actually, there are stories. One particular dreaming story, I won't recount it because it might take too long, but the idea is that the proto-humans emerging out of the land are taught by ancestral beings, spirit beings, which are all the flora and fauna, everything you can think of, help those brand new fetal humans become fully human, and at the same time pass on what we call the law, L-A-W-L-O-R-E. They pass on the meaning of all of this. So in a very real story, you know, creative narrative way, we learn that, you know, what is it all about, because we've been given reflectivity, unlike a whole lot of other life forms. We've been given this idea of reflectivity, so we have to engage in working out what will be basically the rules for living. You know, what kind of system will we have? Social, political, spiritual, ordering system will we have? You know, so you learn that from these ancestors. You know, so it's very, very material. You know,
very close to the notion of what ecological feminists call reproductive labour.
Yes.
Sometimes we call it regenerative labour.
Regenerative labour. Yes.
This brings us to feminism, and of course, questions of the body have been absolutely central to feminism from day one. Ecological feminism, you probably know, but some of our listeners mightn't realise that there are at least half a dozen different paradigms within feminism. There's liberal feminism, there's social, there's anarchist feminism, there's cultural feminism, and there's ecological feminism. There's probably a transnational feminism and so on. So anyway, but ecological feminism to me is the one that makes most sense, because it adopts an ecocentric frame. The others are still all human focused. It's called anthropocentric.
Right,
but
okay.
Ecofeminism frames its questions and arguments and so forth within the framework of nature, the planet, and that conceives humans as nature in embodied form.
Yes.
Well, makes a lot of sense to you.
That's right.
Now, you mentioned earlier about this law of the excluded middle. I know it's one of your favourite topics, and it's one of mine too.
Oh, no.
No, but it's in contrast to relationality.
Yes.
Strictly formalistic analytic logic or traditional philosophy is not helpful to us if we are going to be ecocentric and consider our
that's right.
wider world
yes
processes. And I don't know whether you would go here, but some ecofeminist thinking suggests that this 1-0 logic, yes, no, black, white,
yes.
subject, object, etc., is a sublimation of the moment of the delinking of the male child from the body of the mother. And this psychologically involves a dissociation, and the dissociation is too painful to bear, and it must be sublimated, and it gets sublimated in cultural beliefs and practices.
Right.
This is
Okay.
the Western. This seems to appear in the Western tradition.
Right. Okay.
And so there is a deep psychological process going on, holding Western modernity together. It's not just technology and infrastructure and capitalism that is keeping a lid on things. From the underneath side, from the side of the body, these libidinal drives, which are thwarted and sublimated, are holding our institutions in place, our universalizing institutions in place. Now, I came across this notion through my activism and through engaging with deep ecologists who fascinated me, of course. They were Norwegians and Americans, and they were men in the 1980s who wanted to reclaim an ecocentric sensibility. They were deep ecologists. They really wanted to embrace nature. However, in all their philosophical writings, they never included the fact that they treat the abuse, the Western abuse of nature, the Eurocentric abuse of nature, was actually acted out in parallel in the Western abuse of women's bodies as nature. So that got me rolling my sleeves and getting stuck in there and trying to bring some reflexivity, some consciousness raising. It went on for about 10 years of debate in the journal Environmental Ethics, by the way. And even after 10 years, the penny really had not dropped. The degree of defensiveness and refusal to let women in through the door, they could never complete, even though they wrote very grandiloquently about ecocentrism, they could never complete the circle, you know.
No.
Similarly, with other colleagues, when I was involved with Green parties, but also socialist, aiming to be ecological socialists.
Yes.
Again, aiming to reframe socialism with an ecocentric big picture.
Yes.
But in actual fact, the book I'm working on at the moment is showing the enormous difficulty that socialist men, and they were men, I'm thinking of 3 in particular that I've worked with, who have not been able to bridge, to make that step. It's quite fascinating. So we end up with, as you say, the dissociated logic from ancient Greece. I'm not sure, is it Aristotle or is it Parmenides?
I thought it was Aristotle. Yeah, I thought he was the guy that wrote the book.
Well, yes, maybe Parmenides.
I don't know. Yeah, might have been.
Check that out.
Yes.
But it is the whole of Western culture, the importance of mathematics, and now digitization is based on this. And regardless of our radical movements, what they're aiming for, until they get to an examination of this process, I don't think anything much is going to shift. And I think that the indigenous ways of knowing that you describe as relational are closer to phenomenology.
All right.
I don't know whether you ever Heidegger. I haven't.
Right.
But and I know he's not in everyone's good book. But I did see somewhere that you mentioned Heraclitus in ancient Greek.
Yeah.
You never step in the same river twice.
Yes.
That certainly seems to be,
that's right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, where I could start is from there, really. I tried to understand a whole lot of the Greeks, the old Greeks. The only one that really struck a chord with me was that Heraclitus.
Yes.
Partly because I was approaching it in my own way, from trying to work out our own way. And that's from the beginning of becoming human in this country, you see. So I saw it in a three-part sort of way. Coherence. The land actually teaches us, brought us to a kind of coherence about ourselves. That is, that story of other life forms help the land, that is, helping us to become human. That's this coherence is coming, over a long period of time, of course. And then proportionality, and then predictability. So going through these, but not necessarily in a linear way. For example, when what do you call it? Colonialism comes here. We are kicked back into incoherence. This is native peoples all around the world, indigenous people. When colonialism comes knocking at the door, takes over the country and so on. So it upsets the whole apple cart and stuff. So we have to start again in this way of working, trying to work things out. But trying to work things out, in trying to work things out, where the idea of proportionality, why I like it, I know it sounds like a real hardcore kind of mathematical measuring and all that kind of stuff, but the real meaning of it is to observe and to understand your surroundings, your environment, as to how everything fits together. Yeah. How does it all fit together? How do humans fit in this? And how do humans fit with each other? So it's a fitting out, in a sense. So you're observing this over a long period of time. And of course, everything comes into this fitting out understanding. For example, the landscape that different groups are in, they all have to do that, and it will always be different. So difference is built in. It's not a dangerous thing. It's not a competitive thing, because competitiveness or competitive ethos is just a subset of survivalist ethos. That's how I see it. And I think, well, not so much I see it, but that's how I understand how Aboriginal people worked out managing resources, having rules about transit, having law, actual law, LAWLORE, of how to work in with each other and manage resources. Don't fall for the trap of competitiveness. You can't do much about egoism, because it's part of what makes us human. But you can't just let it rule everything. That's all. Struggle will always, as in conflict, will always be with us. But you have a good system of managing that conflict. And one of the best ways of doing it is to not be invading other people's countries. Don't invade other people's countries, because that's the end of, for all time, in a sense, at the end of security, really, security and stability. You end up with a different kind of stability, a stability that is forced on people, or a forced security, but not natural kind of security and stability. So no invasion of other people's countries in this country, you see. Fights, yes, by all means. But the beginning of it is really is trying to do away with competitiveness. And when you were talking about men just taking on board this, the ruling male ruling hegemony, to me that always strikes me as being very competitive, and it mustn't be competitive. In Aboriginal terms, this is why there is such a thing as women's law and men's law and women's law. In balance, it's a gendered governance system. It has to be a gendered governance system, because women, from our point of view, they embody two. They embody relationship in their bodies, because even all women, even women who can't have children, don't want children, don't even like children, whatever, they're all able to have children physically, yes. Even if actually for some health reasons they can't, in that sense, but they stand for it. So they stand for relationalism, whereas men don't. So you've got to have them as equals, which is why in the metaphysical kind of world, here, and I've recently found out that it's more or less across the whole country, that the sun is female and the moon is male. Now, what that means, you can look at it like a purely, old style legends and, dreaming stories and so on. But both of them are quite unequal as in terms of energy and energy output. According to the science, sun has just enormous energy and the moon has less, apparently. So they're unequal in that way, but they are in balance, and they have to be kept in balance, because it'll be bad news for the earth if it wasn't, So the social thing has to copy that. It has to be held in balance always.
Yes.
So governance has to be male and female, but at a distance, though, just like authority and power. Those things, problematic things, if they're conflated, male and female, of course the male energy is going to overpower. It's like logic, but authority and power, they have to be not conflated too. So they have to be held at a distance, but in balance. And balance is a big thing for Aboriginal people.
To holding.
Okay. Sorry, holding, yes.
I'm going to have a go on that.
Yes, good.
It's my favorite word in all the world.
Yes.
And it has so many meanings.
Yes.
But I take it first as holding as epistemology. And it's the basis of what I call an embodied materialism. And I can see resonance in what you've just been saying there. Although this is a little bit different, perhaps because I've spent a lot of time talking with Marxists and dealing with becoming captured, I suppose, by a materialist way of thinking. But of course, holding is a metaphor. For being materially engaged, as you say, with the custodial ethic. Holding, for me, I play with it around the concept of labor. I like to challenge the socialist thinkers with this notion of holding labor and saying, well, look, you've spent a lot of time talking about labor, changing the world and so forth. But it's all to do with productive labor. It's all to do with taking nature apart and reconstituting it according to man's will. I mean man too, not
yes.
Yeah, not humanity in general. And a kind of labor which would be different would be a labor that mediates humanity and nature together. And that's what I call holding labor. It's exactly as you describe, holding labor, holding ecological processes in place, holding ourselves in place in relation to ecological processes. So I often use the phrase holding as epistemology, but I use it, and I noticed a couple of phrases you had, which is the Indigenous perception is very attuned to signs and patterns. That's what you said, signs and patterns. And I thought this is perfect. I also see it because this is physical. I see this, the way of sensing signs and patterns is actually not through the eye, specular. It's kinesthetic. It's from all the body senses together.
That's right.
It's finding an attunement of energies in our bodies and in nature.
I do believe that.
Yes. And so if you bear with me, I might read you. I at one point I developed a list of what I thought were the characteristics of holding labor. So we could kind of walk through that.
Yeah, okay.
And, once we've done that, I would like to come back to you on Aboriginal method and how you saw it being applied in various ways. But let's first of all look at, so here's an account I'll read you from an old paper of mine. It says, while minimizing risk, often in the face of dire material uncertainty, holding is the ultimate expression of adaptability.
Of what? Sorry, Lord?
Adaptability.
Adaptability, yes.
And while science, as usual, is marred by the positivist separation of fact and value, space and time, a cautious awareness of interconnection is common sense in an embodied materialism. This inbuilt reality testing even compares favorably with demanding standards of scientific falsificationism. So there.
Yes.
Okay. The reproductive labor of mothers and subsistence dwellers can be thought of as constituting a sociologically unspoken meta-industrial class. We're not on about the working class, we're on about a class which is hitherto unnamed and yet absolutely essential prerequisite to maintaining the material basis of civilization, capitalism. Meta-industrials, whether they be indigenous gatherers, fishers, peasant farmers, but also I include mothers of young children and grandmothers who are doing caregiving labor in embodied processes, doesn't need capitalism.
No, it doesn't.
But capitalism needs it. For that
right.
reason, it has enormous strategic power.
Absolutely, yes. It's what I would call a civilizational culture rather than a civilizational state. Yeah.
Wow. We'll go there after.
Yes,
right.
the civilizational state needs more civilizational culture.
Yes.
But whether men accept that or not, men won't accept that.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So I just now go to the criteria of meta-industrial provisioning, which are, as you would and I would say, they are at once ecological and ethical. So first, the consumption footprint is small because local resources are used and monitored with daily care. Scale is intimate and hands-on, maximizing responsiveness to matter energy transformations. And remember, I'm talking either with our relations with land or relations with other bodies.
Yes.
It could be a farmer, it could be a mother. Judgments are built up over time by trial and error. A cradle-to-grave assessment is made over an intergenerational time horizon. Intergenerational.
Yes.
This means that meta-industrial labour is intrinsically precautionary. We don't need to slap the precautionary principle on afterwards when we've messed it all up.
No, that's so true. That's good.
Lines of responsibility are transparent and accountable, far from the tyranny of small decisions that impairs bureaucratized economies. As local social structures are less convoluted than modern industrial ones, there's opportunity for synergistic problem solving, meaning one solution can, in fact, provide the solution for several problems at the same time.
Absolutely, yes.
Synergistic.
Yes.
In domestic organic farm settings or gathering livelihoods, multi-criteria decision-making is essential.
Absolutely.
Regenerative work like this patiently reconciles human time with unpredictable non-linear timings in nature. This is an economic rationality that knows the difference between stocks and flows.
Yes.
It's an autonomous and empowering work process.
Yes.
Without a division between the worker's mental and manual skills. The labour product is not alienated, as Marx described, but immediately enjoyed or shared by the maker. Meta-industrial provisioning is eco-sufficient because it does not externalize costs onto other humans or entropy onto nature.
Good.
Yeah. So, I don't know.
I couldn't but I agree with all of that. Absolutely.
Yeah,
from our point of view, it might be said differently.
Yeah.
Especially about reproductive labor, about women. Well, women, that's why women have to be part of a formal part, not just like a helpmate or a maid, you know what I mean? Number two, kind of in the family, kind of, it has to be formally, politically, administratively, every different which way, have to be in balance. You can't not be in balance. And I'm not talking about equality either. I am talking about balance, because equality always seems to me to be something that is forced on people. It can be forced on people. And sooner or later, someone will get pissed off with it. Whereas balance occurs in nature. It does occur in nature. It's a natural thing. So for example, say I'm talking in a really straightforward administrative way here, a board with 12 people or something like that. And I know all that other stuff about the chairman of the board would be, have if it's a split, they'll have a vote and all that kind of stuff. But it's not to do with that. It's when Aboriginal people tried to set up their own, had to go at setting up their own representative system, it was very balanced. And we were trying to get back to the old system, and of course the government didn't like it and simply swept it out of existence after a couple of years. But it was strictly male-female balance, 20 men, 20 women in each of the three chambers. Every chair was a co-chair, male and female. And this is what Aboriginal people themselves said. They actually said they don't want democracy. They don't want democracy at all. In other words, about 70 to 80% said that. But we thought, being Aboriginal, we'll try and look at this in an Aboriginal way. Well, we can't leave people out. Don't leave people behind. So we'll have a little bit of democracy. Just to satisfy those people who do want democracy, see? So don't have anybody upset.
You were holding them.
That's right. That's exactly right. And they were quite happy, and everyone was quite happy. Yeah.
Let me interject a minute, because I do see a difference emerging between where you're thinking about this and where I'm thinking about it, which is that I'm not so much saying that holding is the province of women.
No, I know what you mean.
Because yes. I actually see the source of I see holding labour available to men or women or black or white or whatever, or old or young. But the source is in the way in which humanity and nature is mediated.
That's right, yes.
That is what creates the principles of holding.
Yes.
In the labour process.
It's in the labour process,
yes.
In the doing,
yes. It's in the doing. It's not customary.
No, I'm glad you said that, because I and many other Aboriginal people don't like the idea of customary law. It's a kind of a put down kind of thing to me. It's real law. It's a monumental idea of law. See, it's not narrow like Western positivist law. Yes. Not at all. It's doing.
You have interesting things to say about that. You've written a paper on that, I think.
I mention it in different ways, and like the idea of autonomous regard and things like that, Yeah.
Can you say more about that, Pat?
Well, there are examples, like, for example, it's a very bad relationship between Aboriginal people and police.
Yes.
Aboriginal people and police. That's why it's very difficult for Aboriginal people to be police, to get into the police force. Right. And not as many as you would think are in it, because the idea is that you can't, in a sense, you can't arrest people. You can't lay hands on people, because you are a completely autonomous being. You cannot do that, you see. It causes huge rows. And that's why it'll always be a bad relationship. So if an Aboriginal person does that to another, you are breaking a law, actually, by treating the other person in not as an autonomous being, you see.
As an object.
Yes, you are treating people as an object if you're treating them like that. So it's like that goes on all the time, but in many other areas, not just black police relationships. according to Aboriginal law, LAWLORE, it's also always the both. It's being the Western system just goes against it all the time, like coming into other people's country, and you just make a huge long list, So that a system that has got at its basis the law of obligation, custodial ethic, and things like that. That guides you, that tells you exactly how you should be conducting yourself all the time in all aspects of life and doing. And like ethics is a doing thing. Obligation is a doing thing. It's not some high ideal that you believe in. It's no use at all of believing in it. You actually have to do the thing.
There were also where I see you refer to Indigenous ways of understanding being applied, and one of them I noticed was therapy.
Oh yeah, no. Well, I just took narrative therapy as the idea of
Narrative therapy.
Telling storytelling, but also dreaming stories, especially those, And I don't mean just necessarily as a,
not in the Freudian sense.
No, and not necessarily only in the what do you call it? Aesop's fables type of thing, good moral lesson and so on and so on. I mean, there's lots in the sense of law itself. There's a story here about how the human mob went against the dolphin mob. They were in partnership with them to go fishing. Dolphin mob would bring in a whole lot of fish. The human mob would sort of haul it up, but share some of it, and that was the payment for that work, to the dolphin mob. And one day it didn't happen. The human mob just took off with it all. And now, if you saw it in a form of a moral philosophy or something, or anything like that, the human mob would be punished straight away, in a moment, I don't know, a flash of lightning or something. But what happened was they weren't punished. What happened, but there are always consequences for actions. So the dolphin mob just went away. They departed the scene, but they're still there, living out there and so on. Yeah. So what that does is make it harder work. They broke a contract. And that's what you have to have, a kind of contract, and maintain this contract in a good way, in a respectful, autonomous regard way. And they didn't, they broke it.
I can share with you, this is actually from our pluribus book. I don't know, is it possible to see?
Yes, oh no, I see it quite clearly. Yep. Yeah.
Pluribus book. Okay, the final chapter in the book is, before we go there, Mary, because I thought that might help to close our conversation.
Yes, okay, sorry.
Very quickly, we didn't mention the word behold.
Oh, behold, yes.
Yes.
Well, the word, to me,
yes,
sorry, behold is, how I took behold is, it's back to this proportionality of observing everything. Coherence comes in, and then you are looking at everything, how you fit. And so it is a kind of knowing already that we're in a sacralizing moment. Do you know what I mean? Yes. So it is this behold, but not at a distance. You are in the behold. We dwell in it. That's why patterns and that we are patterned into the land. When you're patterned into the land, and the land is patterned into you. Do you know what I mean? That's it. You are in the behold. I'm going to go now to
the Zapatistas, and the Zapatistas
yes.
flow out of what you're saying perfectly.
Oh, isn't that deadly?
Well.
That's wonderful.
So this might wrap it up for us, but so the organized principles of governing by obeying. You like that? Governing by obeying.
That's very true.
Including the following premises. All right.
Yes.
So 1, to serve and not to be served.
Yes.
To represent and not to supplant, to build and not to destroy.
Yes.
To obey, not to command.
Yes, certainly.
To propose and not to impose. And to convince, not to defeat.
Yeah. Oh,
to go down and not up.
That's wonderful. I've never heard that. I've never heard any of that before. Jeez. Yes. It really is very much, you know, in the word obey. I was asking, no, my good friend Irene Watson, she was talking to this elderly man from South Australia, Uncle, oh God, isn't it awful? Uncle Lewis. He's an expert in languages, his own and many other people's. He's really old and he's sharp as a tack. And she was asking him, and I was wondering too, about have a word for this, for governance. And it wasn't actually for governance, it was for this, our way of doing things. And he thought about it. He come back a few days later and he said, the word you're looking for, the law, basically, is obey. And we both thought, well, obey, gee, that's very, we'll have to think about that. Because straight away we thought in terms of dictatorship, you see, something like that.
Hard
like
for women, a bit hard for women too.
A bit hard for women to do, yes. But of course, if you think of obey in the terms of duty and responsibility and obligation, then that's very close to that. You have to
obey the laws of nature.
That's right. Well, that
responding to them.
Yes, they're responding to them, the obligation, and that is very close to duty. Like you obey your duty, the duty of life, you know, of society, is to look after the whole place. Yeah, not wreck it. You know. Yes,
I'm getting messages here.
Yes, okay.
So,
yeah. Thank you.
I hope it, to be continued, Mary. I hope
to be continued. Yes.
Yes. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So much to cover. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.